Strobe Studios presents Michael Helgens and Greg Kilberger in The Watson Files. Coming to you from the illustrious Strobe Studios in the heart of America, this is Craig Dahlen. For anyone interested in creating a website, don't forget about the discounts available at GoDaddy.com for all Watson Files listeners. Get the details on this and other discounts at thewatsonfiles.com. And now, let's join the doctor and see what story he has for us today.
Come in.
Good evening, Doctor. Oh, and Mr. Holmes, what a pleasant surprise.
Yes, well, I thought perhaps he was more suited to tell you tonight's story.
Well, I'd be delighted to hear another story from him.
I was not present for this particular adventure, and so am not familiar with the intimate details.
I thought you might be interested in my experiences in Paris while on vacation.
Ah, yes. While the good doctor was looking into the apparent murder of Mrs. Bailey.
Precisely.
So, what type of adventure was this? Murder? Kidnapping? Robbery?
Blackmail, actually.
Ah, the ancient art of keeping secrets for money.
Indeed. The lovely woman's note was a secret of the utmost caliber.
Holmes, be careful now. Don't let him trick you into giving away the ending at the start. He likes to do that.
The doctor knows me too well. Perhaps you should do as he likes to, and simply start at the beginning.
That seems like a reasonable place to start. I was touring Europe and was having a lovely vacation so far, although at times a bit of a bore. Then, while I was staying in Paris, I received a visit from the prefect of the Parisian police, a Monsieur Lestamps. He called on me while I was relaxing in my hotel room. He said that he had heard I was in town and had come to ask my opinion about some official business which had occasioned a great deal of trouble. I, of course, couldn't turn down a good mystery, so I asked him to continue. And what is the difficulty now? Nothing too serious, I hope.
Well, actually, the business is very simple, and I make no doubt that we can manage it sufficiently well ourselves. But then I heard you were in town, and I thought Spencer Holmes would like to hear the details of it because it is so excessively odd.
Simple and odd.
Oui, and at the same time, no. The fact is, we have all been a good deal puzzled because the affair is so simple, and yet baffles us altogether.
Perhaps it is the very simplicity of the thing which causes you grief.
Who ever heard of such an idea?
And what, then, is the matter on hand?
Ah, yes, of course. I will tell you in few words, but before I begin, let me caution you that this is an affair demanding the greatest secrecy, and that I should most probably lose my position I now hold, were it known that I confided it to anyone.
I understand.
Well then, I have received personal information from a very high quarter that a certain document of high importance has been purloined from the royal apartment.
Purloined, you say?
Yes, perhaps you prefer the term stolen.
No, purloined is perfectly all right.
Yes, well, the individual who purloined it is known beyond a doubt. He was seen to take it. It is also known that it still remains in his possession.
And how is this information known?
It is clearly inferred from the nature of the document, and from the non-appearance of certain results which would at once arise from its passing out of the robber's possession.
I'm afraid I still don't quite understand.
No? Well, the disclosure of the document to a third person, who shall be nameless, would bring in question the honor of a person of a most exalted station, and this fact gives the holder of the document an ascendancy over the illustrious person whose honor and peace are so jeopardized.
But this ascendancy, as you put it, would depend upon the person's knowledge of the robber. Who would dare?
The thief is Ambassador Dupin, who dares all things, those unbecoming as well as those becoming a man.
I see. You mentioned that the robber was seen to have taken the document.
Oui, the document in question, a letter to be frank, had been received by the person while alone in the royal boudoir. During its perusal, she was suddenly interrupted by the entrance of the other exalted person from who it was her wish to conceal it. After a hurried and vain endeavor to thrust it in a drawer, she was forced to place it, open as it was, upon a table. The address, however, was uppermost, and the contents thus unexposed. At this juncture enters the Ambassador Dupin. His sharp eye immediately perceives the paper, recognizes the handwriting of the address, observes the awkwardness of the person addressed, and fathom her secret. After some business transactions, he produces a letter somewhat similar to the one in question, opens it, pretends to read it, and then places it in close juxtaposition to the other. Again he converses upon the public affairs. At length, in taking leave, he takes also from the table the letter to which he had no claim.
Ah, very clever.
Its rightful owner saw, but, of course, dared not call attention to the act in the presence of the third person who stood at her elbow.
Yes, I see now.
And the power thus attained has for some months past been wielded for political purposes to a very dangerous extent.
It is clear that the letter is still in the possession of the ambassador, since it is this possession which bestows the power.
And upon that conviction I proceeded. My first care was to make a thorough search of the embassy, although we were forced to perform the search without his knowledge, of course.
That shouldn't be too difficult for an experienced officer such as yourself.
Oui, and he is frequently absent from his home all night, and for 3 months a night has not passed during the greater part of which I have not been engaged personally in ransacking the hotel. As such, I have become fully satisfied that the thief is a more astute man than myself.
And I doubt he is simply keeping the letter on his person.
Out of the question. He has twice been accosted as if by thieves and rigorously searched.
You should have saved yourself the trouble. I gather that he is not altogether a fool and must have anticipated such a trick.
Not altogether a fool, but then he's a poet, which I take to be only once removed from a fool.
Yes, I suppose so, although I have been guilty of clumsy attempts at such myself. So, with 3 months' time, I take it you have thoroughly searched every nook and cranny in the building.
For sure. We pored over every inch of the piece of furniture, searching the drawers, looking for hidden compartment. We looked behind mirrors and artwork, under mattresses.
It sounds like you've gone to a good deal of trouble.
Indeed, but the reward is quite prodigious.
And you looked among his papers and books, of course.
Certainement. We opened every book. So, what do you advise me to do?
Make a thorough research of the premises.
To what end? I am not more sure that I breathe than I am that the letter is not at the embassy.
I don't know what else to tell you. You have, of course, an accurate description of the letter.
Oui, d'accord. It is a typical size letter on white paper, folded in the usual fashion. It is addressed in large block lettering to a certain royal person who I have alluded to, and there is a small red seal with the family coat of arms.
Well, it sounds like you have everything necessary to find the document. I shall be in town for a few more days if you should require any further opinions. Who is it?
Monsieur Letton.
Ah, good afternoon. How are things?
Oh, not too good, I'm afraid.
Ah, so you have made no headway on the Purloined letter?
No, not in the last 3 days, sadly.
How much was the reward, did you say?
Why, a very liberal reward. I don't like to say how much precisely, but one thing I will say is that I wouldn't mind giving my individual check for 50,000 francs to anyone who could obtain me that letter. The fact is, it is becoming of more and more importance every day, and the reward has been latterly doubled. If it were tripled, however, I could do no more than I have done.
I really think, sir, that you have not exerted yourself to the utmost in this matter. You might do a little more, I think.
In what way?
Why, employ counsel in the matter. I'm reminded of a story my associate Dr. Watson tells. A certain rich miser conceived the design of sponging upon the good doctor for a medical opinion, getting up, for this purpose, an ordinary conversation in a private company. He insinuated his case to the physician as that of an imaginary individual. "We will suppose," said the miser, "that his symptoms are such and such. Now, doctor, what would you have directed him to take?" "Take?" replied my friend. "Why, take advice, to be sure."
But I am perfectly willing to take advice and to pay for it. I would really give 50,000 francs to anyone who would aid me in the matter."
"In that case, fill out a check for the amount mentioned. When you have signed it, I will hand you the letter."
"Why, yes, of course."
"Ah, very well then. Here you are."
"Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Holmes. Merci beaucoup."
"And thank you as well."
That is a very interesting story, Holmes. But how in the world did you manage to find the letter?
Yes, it sounds like they had thoroughly searched the entire building for months.
The Parisian police are exceedingly able in their way. Thus, when Lestamps detailed to me his searches at the hotel, I felt entire confidence in his having made a satisfactory investigation, so far as his labors extended.
So far as his labors extended?
Yes. Had the letter been deposited within the range of their search, these gentlemen would, without question, have found it.
So then why didn't they?
The measures were good in their kind and well executed, but their defect lay in their being inapplicable to the case and to the man.
How so?
Lestamps had taken it for granted that all men proceed to conceal a letter in some out-of-the-way hole or corner. However, a disposal of it in such a manner is presumable, and thus its discovery depends upon the mere patience and determination of the seekers.
And you assumed that the robber would be aware of such an inevitability?
Precisely. So I became convinced that he had resorted to not concealing the letter at all.
And what did you do?
Well, I prepared myself by purchasing a pair of very dark sunglasses, and called on the men at the embassy. When I arrived, I engaged him in a conversation about the possibilities for employment, and under the guise of a blind man, remained behind the glasses. With my attention seemingly on him, my eyes were surveying the apartment. Eventually my eyes fell upon a card rack that hung dangling by a dirty blue ribbon from a brass knob just beneath the mantel. In this rack were 5 or 6 cards and a solitary letter, which was soiled and crumpled and torn nearly in two. It had a large black seal and was addressed to the ambassador himself. It was thrust carelessly into one of the uppermost divisions of the rack.
And I take it this letter was the one which you were searching for?
That's what I concluded. Obviously, its appearance was quite different from that Lestamps had described, but the variations were so excessive and the unkempt condition of the letter so inconsistent with the methodical habits of the man, it seemed as though it were designed to appear worthless. And upon further scrutiny, I noticed the edges were quite chafed, as if the paper had been folded one direction and then refolded the other way.
So, he had turned the letter inside out, readdressed, and restamped it.
Correct.
So, did you take the letter?
Not then. I wasn't sure how desperate the man would be to prevent the loss of the document, so I committed its appearance to memory and departed from the office, leaving behind my hat.
So that you had a reason to return.
Precisely. Later in that day I did just that, and we briefly engaged in small talk. Suddenly there was a loud commotion outside, and a gunshot was heard. He, of course, went to the window to observe the goings-on, and I swapped the letter for a duplicate, which I had carefully prepared during the day.
Very clever.
And I'm guessing the commotion outside was not a coincidence?
Correct. I had hired a man from a local theater to cause the fuss while I was in the building.
Well, it sounds like unusual cases follow you everywhere, even on vacation.
Yes, they do indeed.
So, which one of you will be doing the storytelling next week?
I'm afraid you'll be stuck with me again. And I believe I will tell you about the time I used my culinary skills to catch the murderer of a food critic.
Sounds very intriguing. I'll look forward to hearing more next week. Tonight's Watson Files adventure was written by Scott Strosahl and based on an original story by Edgar Allan Poe. Spencer Holmes and Dr. Watson were played by Michael Helgens and Greg Kilberger. Additional voices were performed by Steve Rimpici. This is Craig Dahlen saying good night from Strobe Studios.
Now I will take the reward money and finally become a country and western singer as I have always wanted.